This community group, so I was a professor that was involved in this, but it was a broader community group of residents of Denver called Denver Homeless Out Loud that put this report together. One of the top goals of this was, when this debate went down, there's a big debate about what this van would achieve. There's the stated goals of the camping ban, which we all know, which are essentially to improve the business climate, kind of clean up some of the appearance of downtown, was a key goal of this new ordinance. The police would be better able to offer better services to homeless individuals and enforce it with what was called a light touch and to connect homeless people to better services, and that would be their role. And that the quality of life for homeless people would improve, as I put here, because they would be moving more into services, they would move away from unhealthy street life, and would be better connected to a more healthy lifestyle. Those are the stated goals of what this ban was supposed to achieve. There was, of course, and we all know this, a lot of concerns that a lot of those goals wouldn't be achieved. That yes, downtown may change its appearance, but not because all of a sudden all those homeless folk were moving into services or being connected into better shelters, but essentially because they were moving into hiding, or maybe moving into outlying neighborhoods, or maybe being scared off of downtown. Those are a lot of, you've all heard those criticisms, that they would be more seeking to avoid police, more likely to want to avoid police contact, and that their life conditions would deteriorate. They would be more scared, more fearful, their life would be more challenging, and less safe. Sorry, I'm getting used to the system. And less safe. So the point of the survey is to really just get the voices of the homeless people themselves, to talk to people on the street and ask them, what's happening to you since this ban passed? And that's what this survey reports on. I hope people pick up a copy of the report and look at exactly what it found. Here's what the survey did. The questions were, how often are homeless people approached by the police? And what happens during those contacts? How are homeless people changing their behavior based on the ban? Are they sleeping in different places? Are they sleeping less? Are they moving to new cities? And finally, what do they themselves say about the quality of their life? Is it improving? Deteriorating? Do they feel more or less safe? Are they accessing services? Do they feel things are better? The idea was to get the voices of homeless people themselves and hear what they had to say about how this ban is working. Real quickly, because I only got a few minutes, but there was a serious methodology behind this. I've done a lot of these kind of studies over the years. I do them as a career. And this is a professionally done, solid survey. We did systematic training of dozens of surveyors to make sure that they kind of knew how to approach. You don't go there and say to someone, hey, I think the ban sucks, you think it sucks, let's talk. That's not a proper way to do a survey. It was simply go to these sites, as I put here, cluster sampling. We had to identify about 24 sites around the city, and those involved places where homeless people would be likely to gather. Homeless shelters, street corners, places where they eat, like the Erie campus, and they're in the report. You can see the sites we went to. Dozens of sites around the city. And everybody was there asked, essentially, would you like to take a survey regarding your experiences over the last year? And if they did, they would give in the survey. And they took it. And you can get the whole survey. And that was essentially it. It was done in November, December 2012. It was followed up with focus group and interviews of individuals. It was a sophisticated, well-done survey that got 512 people in Denver, 512 unique homeless individuals to respond. It's really quite rare that kind of survey happens. So we're really happy with able to know what people are saying. So what were the demographics? 512 respondents. That's about 10% of people that were counted as homeless in Denver by MDHI, the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, a year ago. So that's a large number of Denver's homeless population. 72% of those people had spent time regularly on the streets before, sleeping overnight on the streets. Some of them every night, others saying once, a couple times a month. But it's a good representative sample of people who are living on the streets and how they're experiencing this ban. I'm just going to show this real quickly, just to give a sense of confidence. We looked at the demographics of this, and you can kind of see our demographics of the people that the Denver Homeless Out Loud survey reached, compared to the MDHI survey. You know, they're not, of course, exactly correct, the same, but I think they're pretty broadly similar. Similar enough that shows that we have a pretty representative sample here, probably. Maybe, we did a few more Native Americans than MDHI, but a broadly representative sample. This as well, when you look at age or disability or veteran, very similar numbers here. What we mean by male here, these are when you survey single people downtown. MDHI says 75% of them are male, and we surveyed 73% were male. So we believe we have a good, representative, solid sampling of Denver's homeless population, 512 people. So what do they have to say? 3 categories: police contact, what's happening. And these are all of people we surveyed. These are people we surveyed. Here's what they said. 62% of them have been contacted by police in the previous year. It's a way of life. If you're homeless and living in Denver, you're going to be contacted very frequently by police. Not only sometimes, but this is how many times have you been contacted by police? Quite often, 2 to 5 times, 6 to 10 times a number of people. So they're being contacted a lot by police. And this gets to the heart of it. We want to know what happens in these police contacts. How are homeless people experiencing that? What do they say when you ask them? Here are some questions. Have police approached you regarding sleeping, lying down, or covering yourself in public? 57% of people say that they have been approached regarding that. They have been talked to about that. Of those, 76% specifically the police brought up the camping ban. That are you wearing, you can't do that. You can't have a blanket on. You can't sleep here. 83% of those people said they were asked to move along. They were given a warning, an oral warning, essentially. That you can't desist from what you're doing, or you need to move from here, you can't be covering yourself. Did they issue you a verbal or written warning? 76% of everybody approached by the police said they were issued a warning. They need to quit. We know what the ban says. You can't cover yourself. You can't be sitting on cardboard. You can't have a little tarp over your head. 76% have been given a warning. 71% said that they were checked for a warrant. And 26% of people were arrested or cited at least once in the last year. None of them for the camping ban. We list in the report what it was cited for, and it was almost always trespassing or park curfew. But there's a number of other things too. But trespassing or park curfew at least once. Many people are being contacted by police frequently, and they're giving their most common response is they're giving a warning. We put this into this kind of chart. What happens during police contact? Did the police ask you to move along? Were you contacted more than once? 80-some%. These are of all of those who were contacted at least once. Did the police ask you to move along? 80%. Did they issue a verbal warning? Around 70%. Did they contact you regarding sleeping, lying down, or covering yourself? Almost 60%. Were you contacted more than 5 times? 50-some%. All of these have to do with police, contacting you, checking you for warrants, asking you to move along, issuing a warning. These last categories have to do with giving services. Did they ask if you were in need of services? About 20%. Did they direct you to services? 10 to 12. Did they attempt to contact an outreach worker? 5. Did the outreach worker come to help you? 2%. The most common thing that's happening out there is police are contacting homeless folk who are sleeping or violating the camping ban, telling them to desist, warning them about it, moving them along. Very rarely are outreach workers called or contacted or connecting to services, according to people on the street. According to people surveyed, this is what they're saying to us. Very rarely do they experience it as helpful. There's some reason for some of this. Now this you've probably seen. This is the police flow chart of kind of how to enforce the ban, the decision-making structure for how to enforce the ban. I'm not going to go through this, except I'm going to show this is what you go through to decide what to do. Whether to call a service provider, whether to issue a citation, whether to issue a warning. This is a decision-making thing the police department issued. If you break it down into 8 steps, there's a reason why the most common response is a warning to move along, as opposed to here's how to get services. There's a reason for that, and this is the official protocol that the police department uses, and it's kind of written into the law. The number one thing the police does is they enforce other violations. Park curfew. Anything else they observe first. Then, unless there's a medical emergency, like a detox emergency, the next thing they do is they issue an oral warning. This is in the written protocol of how to enforce the ban. Then they issue a written warning that they ask the person to sign. If that person is still there after receiving an oral warning and a written warning, according to the enforcement protocol, they start figuring out if they can connect them to services before an arrest happens. That protocol leads to this, partly. There's not a lot of focus on let's focus here first. The first thing you do is you issue a warning before that. So that's just one finding. That's contact with police. And we got a few minutes here. Changes in behavior. How are homeless people responding to this? 80% of people said they were aware of Denver's camping ban. Since the camping ban was passed, have you changed your behavior? About, as you see here, 69% say yes, I've changed my behavior. About 30% say they have not much. So 60-some% say I have changed how I behave since the camping ban was passed. How? have you changed how you behave? This says, did you used to sleep outside? Do you sleep outside now? You'll see slight changes. These are people that used to sleep outside a lot and still sleep outside now. There's been a reduction of about 5%. And here's another little bit of reduction, and an increase on people that never sleep outside. But those are only like 5–6%. They're not big dramatic changes in whether or not people sleep outside. There's some changes. The bigger change, according to people on the street, is not so much are you sleeping outside, it's where they're sleeping. There's a lot of people still sleeping outside, but they're not sleeping downtown. Of those that sometimes sleep outside, 80% say their most common response is to avoid downtown sleeping more than they used to. Yes, I always avoid sleeping downtown now, 52%. Sometimes I avoid downtown. No, I do not, 21%. So there's still some people, we all know that, that are still sleeping downtown and on the mall, and they're there. But there's been a dramatic reduction in the amount of people that sleep visibly and cover themselves downtown. And we kind of see that. But if you ask people, that's exactly what they're saying. They're not all moving into shelters, they're just moving out of downtown. In fact, where are they moving? 62% say, I found a more hidden, solitary place to sleep. Since the ban, I have chosen more often to find hidden places. 40% shelters more often. 20% and 20% both say they've moved to surrounding cities or maybe more often to other neighborhoods. These are self-reported numbers of people on the street. Do you move into other neighborhoods? Yes, that's what I've done more of. And then a small percent have been able to find independent housing since the ban passed. That's where people are going since the ban passed. Let's look at this shelter more option one in a little more depth. This is important to be thinking of. There's a large number of people. I can tell you, we've done a lot of focus groups and a lot of interviews. And so many people, that's what they say. I'm hiding. I found a hidden place to sleep. I used to sleep in the mall. Why did I sleep on the mall? It was safe and well lit and central. I liked it. I liked that the police kind of were there nearby, but didn't run us off. Now I'm hiding and I feel less safe. That is the dominant response we heard. It's very clear, we heard it all the time. What about shelters? Some have tried to get into shelters. 73% have been turned away at least once from shelters. And this is the frequency. 32% frequently, 25% sometimes, 16% a few times. So a lot of people are trying to get into shelters, they're commonly turned away. Sometimes because they're full, other times, as we all know, because we don't have all the shelters we need for, let's say, a couple without children, or a father with a child, or a lesbian gay couple. We don't have the right kind of shelter, so people are commonly turned away. Even though they're trying to get into shelters, most people say shelters are harder to get into now than it was before the ban. 65%. 4% say it's easier to get into shelters. Some say the same. Most people say I'm having a harder time getting into shelter. That's just a housing assistance wait list. I don't have time to get into this, but this is what we all know. People have been trying to get housing assistance. They try to get programs. A lot of people have been on a long time waiting for the kind of housing assistance that might help them be independent. So they're having a hard time getting into shelters. They're having a hard time getting housing assistance. Those are common responses to since the ban has passed. This is one interesting finding, make of it what you will, but we asked people, do you know people who moved out of Denver? 20% of respondents said, I am more likely, personally, I've slept more often out of Denver since the ban. 42% say they know other people who have moved out of Denver since the ban. So whatever that's worth, these are self-reported numbers of people that say, I believe people are moving out of Denver because of this ban more often. So how is this affecting their quality of life? Why did you used to sleep on the mall? A lot of these people used to sleep on the mall. Why? 50%, it was safe and well lit. I liked it was central, safe, and lit. Because I'm scared. Because I'm vulnerable on the street. 10%, I really didn't know where else to go. 8% said them accessible. 6% I knew people. So these top reasons are I knew other people. I didn't know where else to go. It was safe, it was lit. That's where I needed to be. Since now they can't anymore. It's illegal to shelter yourself on the mall. Tonight you can't survive on the mall without breaking the law because it's going to be cold. So you'll either break the law or you'll find somewhere else to hide. Think about your situation, how have things changed? Do you feel more or less safe? Less safe, 53%. More safe, 6%. Do you get more or less sleep? Less sleep, 60%. More sleep, 11%. Another common thing we hear all the time. I'm always moving. I'm being asked to move, I'm hiding, I don't know where I'm at anymore, I feel less safe, I'm moving, I'm moving, I'm moving. I'm not getting sleep. You hear that all the time. 60% less sleep. How has this affected you? 50%, 20% positive. How has your access changed to shelter? 60% more difficult, 9% less. Finally, other resources, 47% more, 7% less. Not a good set of numbers for quality of life for homeless individuals in our city. It is more necessary to avoid the police today, says almost 60% of the people. 4% say the police have become more helpful in my life. The deteriorating quality of life. 37% of respondents say they sometimes choose not to cover themselves from the elements because they're worried about the ban. However, I mean, if that's true, if that's a real number, that's a pretty grim number. 37% have chosen to do that. 59% say it is more necessary to avoid the police. 4% say it's more helpful. 53% say they're less safe. Only 6% feel more safe. So, all told, we believe this kind of points to there's a lot of contact with police. The most common response is to kind of move people along, warn them they can't be there. People are moving into hiding. They're moving into their neighborhoods. They're trying to get into shelters sometimes, but there's not often the shelters they need and it's overcrowded. And there's not the right kind of shelter for them, and they self-report that their life is getting worse. That's all self-reported. So that means, in terms of the goals of the camping ban, we have been very successful in changing the appearance of downtown, because there is a lot less homeless people on the street publicly. It has not been successful. That's just the facts. And the other stated goals, which are, this is going to improve their life. This is going to connect them all to services. Those aren't happening. The data doesn't show it in our survey. So what does that mean for recommendations? We have 4. There will be people tonight on the street, we all know it, sleeping outside. They'll be there. We do not have the right shelter options. We know there are people that can't get in, they will be there. There should be somewhere in Denver that is safe, well-lit, and legal where they can sleep without being a criminal and protect themselves from cold weather. Somewhere. It doesn't have to be 16th Street Mall, but there should be somewhere that can happen. We all know this, you talked about it. We need a new revenue stream in the Housing Task Force of 2012. Our mayor said that. A new dedicated funding stream. Not just money from the general fund, but impact fees or a millage or something to get real money, because we need new shelter options. We can't have laws like this, and they will not work without more services. So there has to be a new dedicated funding stream, and some of the key needs of that funding stream, what we found is there are these huge underserved populations. Couples, LGBT, mental illness. These people, it doesn't matter if we had a lot of shelter units, they can't get into the existing shelter units. There needs to be new kinds of shelter. And then rapid rehousing, that is new housing units. And these are here's, but we're adding to the chorus. These things have to happen if we're serious about this law achieving its results. Finally, if we were to simply change the enforcement protocol to emphasize connection to services before the warning, it may have a pretty dramatic effect. That is, that when a police officer finds someone covering themselves, if they're required under the protocol to say, here is a shelter right now that can take you, and if you're not willing to do it, you need to move along. That's different than you need to move along, and if you're still here in 5 minutes, now I'll see if there's a shelter. Because people move along, you know, or urge them to move along. So this, if the protocol reversed to identify the service first, before the move along warning was issued, it would have a pretty revolutionary effect. Councilman Kanich, I think, proposed this as a proposed amendment when the ban was being debated. Our findings suggest that it would be a good amendment to this ban. I think I've probably taken my 15 minutes.